This program was brought to you by Koller Institute of Venture at Tel Aviv University.
So we looked at the overall ecosystem at the beginning of our track. We looked at crowdfunding and crowd as affecting the venture ecosystem. We looked at a particular example by Shai. But obviously, the ecosystem is changing, and I would love to get your perspective. Thank you.
So, how do you make this work? I think you did. Okay. So, maybe we can start with Eitan, just as an introduction, and ask, where do you get your money from? You have the Bird Foundation.
Right. My name is Eitan Yudilevich. I'm the executive director of the Bird Foundation. The Bird Foundation is a U.S.-Israel organization that supports joint projects between U.S. companies and Israeli companies. We're funded by both governments. We have very stable funding, and we've been in place for a long time. And actually,
so the next question is, how do I get some of it?
How do you get some money? Yes, actually, in order to get some money, you have to move to the U.S. and have a U.S. company, and there should be a U.S. company, an Israeli company doing a joint project. This is a competitive process. Companies apply and can get up to $1 million, not more than 50% of the value of the project. We don't ask for any equity, not for any IP rights. The only thing we ask for is the project is successful. We even don't ask to send us the product, the plane, but we do ask to repay the grant. So it's actually.
How do you define success?
Success means sales. So if you get revenue, you're supposed to repay. Okay. Now one more word, because I want to connect to what was being said. We are looking to innovate in the way we fund also. Okay. So I'm sure that we'll have another opportunity to talk about what are my thoughts about what we heard today.
Want me to go?
Yeah, where do you get your money from?
That's it?
And how do you spend it?
So my name is Dor Berman, and I'm the founding partner of Innovation Endeavors. I started Innovation with Eric Schmidt just about 4 years ago with the idea of finding the most interesting, ambitious entrepreneurs around the world that really wanted to make an impact and build meaningful companies. We weren't interested in just starting another venture fund for the reason you just heard. So we set out what we saw as a categorically different venture firm in terms of the philosophy we used, the models and the structure we used. I can elaborate on that later, but the money comes from Eric Schmidt, to your question. Over the last few years, we invested heavily both in the US and Israel, which we see as the most innovative ecosystems with the smartest technologies around the world.
And Simon, do you have any money?
Well, we have a little bit of money. We're a government department, so it's the Hong Kong taxpayers that give us our money, but tax rates are capped at 15% in Hong Kong, so we have to be quite careful about how we spend our money.
So that's where you get your money. How do I get it?
You don't get money from us. Our job is to help you to understand how you can make money in Hong Kong. So our role is to attract and assist businesses to set up. Traditionally, we're an investment promotion agency, but in the last 2 years, we've expanded our remit, and we're looking very aggressively at how we can support the startup ecosystem in Hong Kong. And in many respects, we're not driving this. We're reacting to something that's already happening, because in the last 18 months, we've seen the number of co-work spaces in Hong Kong grow from 2 to 30 today. And we've seen the number of individual founders and entrepreneurs that have been moving to Hong Kong grow at a rate of 77% in just the last 2 years. So we're reacting, and we're trying to promote and bring Hong Kong to that tipping point where we can start to emulate some of the success of Israel.
Thank you. This is meant to be a very interactive part, reflective part. So if anyone's got a question, that would be very helpful. Could someone comment particularly on the last 3 presentations, crowdfunding, and how that is that going to disrupt the system, or is that just a niche part?
I can speak briefly about it. We are also, just to disclose, we are investors in AngelList, which is one of the major players in the market. I would first and foremost say that the ecosystem has been changing a lot, and it's really fun to see sort of the new models that have been emerging. I mean, if you look at the last 10 years and the amount of changes and innovation that happened, you can see that just by the leading funds today, the leading platforms today that people are using for fundraising, they haven't existed 10 years ago. I mean, anything from Kickstarter to Our Crowd to AngelList to even Y Combinator, as a sort of a new accelerator model, to Andreessen Horowitz, which is one of the new VC that has emerged over the last 10 years as pretty much the leading VC in the world today. To the question of basically seeing both Our Crowd and Kickstarter, I see them generally as very, very different platforms, right? I mean, Kickstarter is a great, great platform, but it's really a marketing platform. It's a pre-sales platform that allow everybody to, it's a new channel for people to sell their products before it's going to market. AngelList and Our Crowd really provides a new way for everybody to become an investor, which is disruptive, immensely disruptive, right? This is a new way for everybody to put their money into companies that they like, right, and make it meaningful. And that's also coupled with the dramatic reduction in the cost of starting a business, right, which makes every angel investor actually count today, right? Where this was not the case maybe 10 years ago. If you look forward, or if you look at the current state, I think it's still early to judge whether this will be successful or not, right? Like, it's hard to say based on what we see today. I mean, it's just getting started. We see more and more of we see sort of the early adopters, the early investors try to understand how it works, try to put some money to play with it. But
under what conditions could it not work?
I think it's a question of adoption, right? I mean, first of all, it's a question of adoption, whether there is enough interest from the market to put money into startups, right? It's not the most, it's sexy and all, but right? Like, generally, VCs haven't made money over the last 10 years, right? So it's not guaranteed you will make money, right? If you look at the Kickstarter history.
Why haven't VCs made money?
Oh, that's a whole different story.
Well, it's part of this story.
Why haven't VC made money? Basically because the model doesn't work, right? You can see the old VC's model, which really had a small number of people making decisions, supposed to, well, I can maybe elaborate on later. I think it's a sort of just distracting the main conversation. Just going back to the democratization of VC and the changes in the models we are seeing today, I think that AngelList and Our Crowd, it's just the beginning, right? We're going to see a lot more changes. We're going to see the models becoming more and more agile, and VC, which have been adopting already, will need to continue and adopt constantly.
I think that the key is equity crowdfunding. And I'm actually not so updated. I mean, I'm not sure that I am 100% updated what's going on that, but my understanding is that in the US, the Jobs Act 2012 actually specified the need to regulate and allow for equity crowdfunding, and that's an ongoing process that the SEC is working on. I think the moment we'll have, if it's possible to have equity, mass equity crowdfunding, I think it will be a real, change, and it will be a real, very important development. And I think it connects to what we do because, for example, one of the projects that John presented, the Rewalk, was prior to the investment in Our Crowd was supported by the Bird Foundation, and we require matching from private sector. So imagine a situation in which a company comes, they win a Bird grant, but they don't have the matching funds. Maybe we can help them do crowdfunding, partnering with a platform that has that actually does not reward crowdfunding, but equity crowdfunding. So and that idea actually has even been brought up by a member of our board of governors. He's a State Department person, And there was a big study done by the World Bank on crowdfunding, and I think they learned that from that study, and they came to me and asked me to think about how, in the future, we can cooperate with the crowdfunding platform. It seems today, far-fetched, not very realistic, but I think, listening today to what, the presentations, I believe that it's not impossible.
I think crowdfunding's here to stay. I think it is going to be enormously disruptive and enormously beneficial to really creating more startups and supporting more startups. But I don't think it's going to be a smooth ride. I think there are going to be bumps along the way. I think the regulators are playing catch up. And I think that, a lot of questions still have to be ironed out. I mean, who regulates the platform? What happens if a platform disappears? What happens if people misrepresent themselves? How do you stop grandmothers putting all their life savings into something that looks good because the video's slick but has no substance behind it? And I think the really serious players actually want some form of regulation to stop cowboys coming in and discrediting crowdfunding in the future. But it's definitely here, something that's going to stay, but something we've got to watch.
And we had other presentations today, one on how governments can influence and incentivize startups, etc. Robin, you're one way to do it. You're not Robin. Eitan. Close enough. The Bird Foundation is one way to do it, but have you seen success in has it been a successful method of funding and incentivizing companies?
Okay, so actually the Bird Foundation has been in place for 37 years, and it has been very successful in making things happen. I can say that actually it was created at the very beginning of we now call the high-tech ecosystem in Israel. I can say also that the concept of cooperation, okay, has become now very, very popular. I would say more than popular. It's actually a must. So if we talk about numbers, the Bird Foundation has supported more than 850 projects. We have about $10 billion in sales for projects that, more than $10 billion in sales for projects that have been successful. We know that because of the repayment mechanism, so we follow projects. There are many success stories, and it certainly works. But I think the reason why it works, among other things, is because of this cooperation with the private sector, because we don't invest by ourselves, or we don't support the project without having the private sector funding. And the other thing I think is important to say is that we take a lot of risk. I mean, the government is funding, or is helping funding, both government, risky projects. It's not more of the same, okay? So if let's say a project that has a very high level, a very high percentage of success probability comes to us. It may be very nice with a lot of business potential, but the chances of getting the grant are lower than a risky project. They may get the grant. So that's a combination that is important to say. This is money coming from taxpayers, and it's used for that. For example, in the pharma sector, in the biotech sector, we have a special model called the pharma model to fund what is called the value of death of these projects in the area, in the stages of discovery and preclinical, okay, or even phase 1. So that's our goal. Of course, funding U.S.-Israeli collaboration, that's a very important goal. Incidentally, today we have a lot of U.S. small companies coming to us. About 50% of the projects we fund, The US companies are less than 50 employees. So summarizing, it has been a very successful model, and I think many other countries and even would say states within the US mimic it, okay, or try to mimic it. That's it.
I have a question. So I wasn't here for the government funding aspect of things, but I'm curious in general about Israel is doing a lot in government funding. Obviously, the Chief Scientist and Brain Foundation is a sort of US-Israel collaboration. There's also the other side of government funding, right? Basically, artificially intervening in the market and maintaining startups that perhaps should not be maintained, right? And the downside of that is obviously getting talent away from startups that are valid and are here to stay, but they can't get the talent because there's this huge proliferation of startups that are getting started and getting funding. How do you prevent a situation where you're basically not spending taxpayers' money on the wrong projects? On the wrong projects, and basically sort of interfering in the market in a way that you really don't want to.
Yeah, I understand. I think you understand what you're saying. I mean, the chief scientist, the chief scientist, which is around, Avi Hassan today, is very keen about. Your thought is very, very correct in the sense that, especially I hear that from him very often. There's no wish to interfere with the market. The opposite. So that's one of the reasons, for example, you talk to the chief scientist, and he'll tell you that he doesn't want to focus on a specific sector. He doesn't want to direct the market to a specific sector. He wants to be sector agnostic. That's, for example, one way of doing that. The other way, I think, is because of this private, public, or let's say private government sharing of the funding. The government will never fund a project 100%, okay? 30%, 50%. So I think that all in all, there may be mistakes done, but I don't think that by getting this, chief scientist funding or BER funding, you actually keep a company in place which actually has to go away. I don't think that happens from experience. It may happen from time to time, but remember that all in all, the funding is quite limited and is project-oriented. You don't really go into a company and put equity. There's no directors from the government. So I think the model has been working well in that sense.
This program was brought to you by Koller Institute of Venture at Tel Aviv University.